Well, here's a little story from Seamus Ennis, great piper, wonderful raconteur, about a little girl who lived in Ireland a long time back when the children at a certain age were expected to go work in the farming communities for a season. So it was one little girl's time to go, and they went to the hiring fair, which is where the farmers found the young people. And she was waiting, and there were people being hired to the right of her and the left of her, and she wasn't being hired. She was a little nervous she wouldn't be picked, when up came a little man with a pink peaked cap, red boots above his knees, a little green jacket, and a long grey beard. And he said, "You look like a strong girl, I'll hire you." She said, "Well, my mother said I should get a good wage." "Oh, I'll pay you well, you look strong, now come along." And the deal was made with her parents, and off she went with them. And in those days there were no buses or taxis or trams, and so they just had to walk along on their own 2 feet. And as they were walking, he looked at her and said, "Now, little girl, what would you call me?" And she said, "Well, Mr. or Sir, the master of the house, whatever you please, sir." And he said, "No, no, I'm Dom Precepto." "Very good, sir," she says. Well, soon enough they came in sight of the most beautiful little thatched cabin you've ever seen in your life, little curl of smoke out the chimney. And he said, "Little girl, what will you call that?" She said, "Well, it's the house or the hut or whatever you please, sir." "Ah, no," he said, "that's the great Castle Strawbuncle." "Very good, sir," she said. Well, she was a dutiful little girl. She knew well what her tasks would likely be, and so she immediately set to making the tea. She took the kettle and she was dipping water into it from the barrel. And he said, "Little girl, what do you call that?" She said, "Well, it's the water, the wet, or moisture, whatever you please, sir." He said, "Ah, no, that's pondalorum." "Very good, sir." So she took the kettle, she hung it on the hob, and was stirring up the flames when he came in and said, "Little girl, now what do you call that?" She said, "Well, it's the heat, or the flames, or the embers, or the coals, or the fire, or whatever you please, sir." He said, "That's hot cockalorum." "Very good, sir," she said. Just then the cat came up and was rubbing up against her, and she was petting it a little. And he said, "Now, little girl, what do you call that?" She said, "It's the cat, or the pussycat, or the kitty, or the kitten, or," he said, "Ah, no, that's white-faced simony. Now come, little girl, I'll show you the rest of the house." And he showed her her room downstairs, and he showed her around, and he as they were going up the steps, he stopped and he pointed down, and he said, "Little girl, what do you call these?" And she said, "The steps, or the stairs, or whatever you please, sir." He said, "Ah, no, that's the wooden hill." "Very good, sir," she said. Well, they went on up, and he was showing her around. He showed her in it where his bedroom and where he slept, and he said, "Now, what do you call that, little girl?" She says, "Well, it's your bed, or your bunk, or your cot, or your sleeping place, or whatever you please, sir." He said, "Ah, no, that's me barnacle." And a little later, he'd had his big nightgown on, but he was having trouble getting his boots, and he said, "Little girl, will you give me a hand with these?" And as she was tugging on the big red boots, he's tugging away, and he says, "Now, little girl, what do you call those?" She said, "Well, they're your boots, or your brogues, or your flip-flops, or your Nikes, or your tennies, or whatever you please, sir." He said, "Those," she tugged them off, "those are me hay-down trudders." And then he handed her his trousers, and he said, "Would you take those and hang them up for me?" "Thank you, little girl. By the way, what do you call them?" She said, "They're your pants, or your trousers, or whatever you please, sir." "Ah, no," he says, "those are me fortune's crackers. Now, good night, little girl." Well, it wasn't too long before there was a tremendous racket from downstairs, and the little girl's voice wafted up the stairway, and she said, Domine Precepto, rise up out of your barnacle, put on your fortune's crackers and your hay-down treaders, and come down the wooden hill, for white-faced simony has a spot of hot cockalorum on her tail, and if we don't pour pondalorum on it soon, the whole grey Castle Strawbunkle's going up in hot cockalorum. Well, Seamus Ennis, he said always that he knew that little girl in later years, and whenever he played this particular reel, which is called The Smoky House, where she'd run a mile.